Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Amar, and I am the Executive Director of the Georgia Justice Project. And welcome to our 2021 Legislative Kickoff event. And I welcome all of you who've been working with us for the last few years on our Second Chance campaign. I just want to appreciate all of your great work and thank you for your great work. And we obviously we'll hear more about the success of our campaign in a few minutes, but I just want to give you my personal thank you to say we appreciate everything you've done. I'm going to take a couple minutes just to talk about, just to contextualize both the criminal justice system in Georgia, but as well as Georgia Justice Project's work in that space before I hand it over to Brenda Smeaton, our legal director. But we're excited to have just a good event for you today, and looking forward to sharing how we are expanding our policy work here at the Georgia Justice Project. And we certainly hope that you all will help us and move that agenda forward. So this first slide is just a quick iteration of the criminal justice system. Most folks know that I believe in buckets of three, but so do most criminologists. And they talk about the criminal justice system in threes in terms of the front end, middle, and back end. And the front end is sort of the, from arrest, if you will, to the case resolution or conviction if it happens. The middle is incarceration if that happens. And of course, the back end is reentry, which includes probation and parole. And just some quick numbers to give you a perspective. In Georgia, there's about 39,000 people sitting in jail, mostly waiting for their case to be heard. There's another 54,000 or so folks in the prison system in that middle bucket, of course. And then on the back end, there are, we talk about the 4.3 million people who have a criminal record. That's folks who have been arrested and or convicted. But one data point that's driving a lot of our work today is this issue of those under correctional control. And the definition for those under correctional control is folks who are either in jail, prison, probation, or parole. Jail, prison, probation, or parole. And in Georgia, you see that number is about 527,000 people. And we as a state, of course, unfortunately, have led the nation with this number as a per capita part of our population. 1 in 18 Georgians are either in jail, prison, or probation, or parole. And we've been leaving the country, unfortunately, for a while on this. And it's obviously driven a large part by felony probation. Felony probation represents about 225 to 230,000 people of that 527,000 folks. So it just gives you a quick perspective. I like to use this to start conversations about the criminal justice system. And the next slide really just talks about our work in the system. And many of you know us and are good friends, but for those who don't, the organization's on our 35th year this year. And we really work at every phase of the system. Many folks know us for our holistic criminal defense work, which is that happens sort of in the first part, the red or orangish part. We get involved with people and represent people, of course, free of charge, and follow our clients, which has been a hallmark for our work for 35 years. Follow our clients into prison if they go. Very few do go, but some do. And help folks on the back end and follow them even as they reenter and as they get out of their case or get out of jail or prison as they get back on their feet. So that's one part of our work that really touches really all three parts of the system. The second part I'd point out is this prison visitation or prison support work we're doing, which has a couple elements to it. One, some of you know that we've been working very closely for the last 2.5 years or so with the Metro Reentry Facility, helping folks out there. This is a relatively new prison in Georgia. Remove the barriers they have, the legal barriers they have to reentry. And we also have one of our social workers who focuses on employment on that front as well. So we do a lot of direct service work in that space, as well as following our clients who represent on the front end who end up in prison. And then, of course, many people know us for our criminal records and sort of work that we've done now for quite a while. And that's helping people remove the barriers to reentry. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about that with regard to the most recent success with 288, and that work continues, obviously. But then lastly, I'll just say in terms of this slide that we obviously for the last 12 years have been focused on policy, and our policy work really touches about every phase of the system. So that green arc on the outside kind of represents our work that's affecting the more systemic issues. So I just use this visual, and hopefully it will be helpful for you to sort of understand our work or be reminded of our work and how we work at every phase. So with that reminder, I'm excited to turn over the microphone, so to speak, to Brenda Smeaton, our legal director, who's going to talk about where we are coming up and where we've been. Thanks, Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I guess. So excited to have so many of you here with us. I know many of you are here as a result of your endorsement of and support of the Second Chance for Georgia campaign, which Doug mentioned briefly. The expungement reform that was passed last year in SB 288 was, you probably know, an effort that was many years in the making and is, of course, a huge leap forward for Georgia. The last major reform that we had around expungement law was in 2012, and that only included non-convictions and youthful offenders, so expungement for certain folks that were under 21 when they were convicted of a misdemeanor. But the effort to expand expungement of convictions was stalled for several years, and certainly the campaign is one of the biggest factors in turning that around. So we hired, I do want to just give a brief shout out. We hired Ann Colleton almost 2 years ago as our policy and outreach coordinator, and she did a phenomenal job of putting together the campaign, which allowed us to show a broad base of support for this reform. You know, political advocacy groups running the political spectrum, and also many congregations and service providers. So I just wanted to also add my gratitude and thanks to all of you, and say that I'm looking forward to continuing to partner on these issues that we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes. And I do want to go ahead and give you a very brief overview of what SB 288 actually does. And SB 288, it passed back in July and was signed in August, but it didn't go into effect until this January. So it's just been in effect for a couple of days now. What it does, the major, the biggest win for people with a criminal history under SB 288 is that it provides for restriction and sealing, which is a process that most other states call expungement. So restriction and sealing of certain misdemeanor convictions. And based on the data that we have from Georgia, we estimate that over 1.5 million people are going to be eligible to clean up their criminal history under SB 288. So what it does is it allows an individual to expunge up to 2 misdemeanor convictions from their record. They can apply 4 years after the completion of their sentence. They have to have been crime-free in that 4 years, so no convictions. Some arrests might be okay, but no convictions. And it is, we want to make sure everyone is aware that it's not automatic. There are some other states around the country that have been passing automatic reforms, and there's some, that's what we'd like to move to in Georgia, but there's some implementation issues. So it does involve a court process. So you've got to file something and potentially go in front of a judge and get the judge to sign off. So we're going to give you some information at the end about how you can contact us if you or someone you know is interested in taking advantage of SB 288. So that's misdemeanor convictions. A lot of people will be helped by that. Also, we were able to include some felony convictions, not as many as we would like. We're going to continue to work on that. But what it does is it allows an individual who received a pardon for certain felony offenses, as long as it wasn't a serious violent or a serious sex offense, to petition the court to restrict and seal their record. So about 500 folks get a pardon a year. It's a process where you have to apply through the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. It takes about 6 to 9 months for them to consider your application. You can apply for a pardon 5 years after you're off paper. So 5 years no longer on probation or parole. So anyone that gets a pardon, if it's an eligible offense, then they can go ahead and immediately file something and ask a judge to seal, to restrict and seal, basically expunge the record of their conviction. So we are really excited about the possibility for folks to be able to get some felonies off of their records so they're not visible anymore. And on the next slide, I just want to show you briefly, and if we could go ahead and advance to the next slide, thank you. I'm not going to go into detail about what the big picture is about criminal records in Georgia, because there are also other ways that you can clean up your record and minimize it. But I will tell you about how you can get some more information. We do at least one training a month, usually multiple trainings. So I've got some information about how you can sign up for that. But with SB 288, we now have 3 different ways that individuals can get felony convictions off of their record. Retroactive first offender, which is a reform that we worked on that went into effect in 2015. SB 288, sealing the pardon felony convictions, and Survivors First Act, which passed this last year and is for victims, survivors of human trafficking. Misdemeanor convictions, same 3 ways, just with the different eligibility that I talked about. First offender, you are able to discharge and now seal due to some reforms that went into place in 2016 to get those off of your record, as well as some pending cases and non-convictions, because even an employer might hold an arrest against you, even if you weren't convicted. So there's quite a few different remedies that we have in Georgia now to be able to clean up your record. And like I said, I'll tell you how you can learn some more about those. Also want to just briefly mention that SB 288 also is a pretty major change and a really positive change for encouraging second chance hiring by businesses, because it provides some protections for employers. We worked with the Metro Atlanta Chamber and several businesses that are based in Georgia to advocate for SB 288. And part of what passed is some liability protections. You know, sometimes companies have fears about hiring somebody with a record. You know, what if that individual gets in trouble and then I get sued for negligent hiring? So we were able to pass some pretty strong reform to limit those concerns for companies. And in addition to limiting what employers can see on your background, because you've had it expunged, so they're just not going to see it all, it limits any evidence that might be used in a case against them, and says that, you know, if your criminal history wasn't relevant to any case that may have been filed, or if it was restricted and sealed or pardoned, or you were arrested and it didn't result in a conviction, then that's just not relevant in a lawsuit against that employer. So we are doing our best to partner with the chamber and get the word out to employers about that, to encourage them to hire more people with a criminal history. And then the last thing, as I mentioned, I just wanted to tell you about some upcoming events where you can learn, where we'll go into much more depth about cleaning up criminal histories in Georgia. I'm doing an event tomorrow with the Metro Atlanta Chamber at noon, which is going to be an hour event where we're going to talk about SB 288 eligibility. And then we do a presentation the first Friday of every month, which you can pre-register for. We do try to limit the number of folks that attend that so we can get to all your questions. And the next one will be coming up February 5th. And since pardons are now so much more important, since they can lead to felony expungement, we've been doing some trainings around how to apply for a pardon. And our next training around that is coming up on January 28th. And then I've also got our intake information, which we will put up at the end as well. And I believe DJ is going to mention a little bit about that as well. So that is the very brief summary of SB 288 and how it fits in. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to one of our partners in the campaign and a partner in our work for many years, Marilyn Wynn, who many of you probably know. Marilyn is the co-founder and executive director of Women on the Rise, which is a grassroots organization led by formerly incarcerated women. She has a very long list of accomplishments. I just want to highlight a couple of them. She was a Just Leadership USA 2016 fellow and a 2021 Center for Civic Innovation fellow. And I also just want to mention that she received the first Lilly Ledbetter Award from 9 to 5 because she instituted and led the successful campaign to ban the box in Atlanta. And then that led to Governor Deal signing an executive order to ban the box for state employers in Georgia as well. And she also is currently serving as the co-chair, or she served as the co-chair of the City of Atlanta Reimagine Atlanta City Detention Center Task Force, which continues to be an effort that needs attention and work. And she continues to lead the Community Over Cages campaign. And I just want to turn it over to Marilyn to talk about why it was important for her and Women on the Rise to support the campaign.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And I am so excited to be a part of this. I want to call it a history making again. Seems like Atlanta and Georgia is doing a lot of making history in many ways to end criminal injustices. Uh, SB 288 is, I want to call it a lead way to ending a life sentence for people who are impacted by the criminal justice system. And as Doug mentioned in all the statistics that he shared with us earlier on in this presentation, uh, those are many people that are coming out of the system that will not, if this legislation had not passed, will not be able to get jobs. So what this legislation has done, not just for them, but for me, and let me back up a little bit. So I am Marilyn Wynn. I'm Executive Director of Women on the Rise. And I don't know why I'm nervous because I do this all the time. But my organization is an organization that is led and ran by formerly incarcerated women of color. I am formerly incarcerated. I work for and with formerly incarcerated women. And there have been many of times that if not for things like passing legislation of this sort, we do not have housing, we do not have jobs, we do not have education because of public just the laws and the rules just and legislation just have not permitted that for us. But through this type of legislation, we are able to not just have a second chance, but another chance to become just like any other taxpaying citizen, another chance to have a place to live and human rights. We don't have to live under the bridges. We don't have to work for less than minimum wage. We don't have to be where we cannot get education. And so I want to share a little bit about my own personal background. I am, like I said, I'm formerly incarcerated. I have served, I thought 6 prison sentences, but actually yesterday I was looking at my record and I actually served 7 prison sentences. And it was only because when I committed my first offense as a teenager and I went to prison at 17 and I came back, thought that I was going to be able to get a job, work for the city, work for Atlanta Housing Authority or for the post office, which then was the prestige jobs to work. That didn't happen for me because I had a record and because I was a woman and because I were a Black woman. So this legislation to me and to the people I work for is very impacted for us to be able to move forward, to be able to have those things that we need. And with uh, I have with Georgia Justice Project have received a pardon. I have worked along with them in many aspects of the legislations that in the legislations and changes that they have made during the years. And we continue, and I will continue to support and fight this because this is what we need. This is what make people thrive and feel worthy of and want to do the right thing. We can't do the right thing if people don't put the right thing in place for us to do. Until a person is able to get a job, they will continue doing the things that they do to keep them in the system. Until a person is able to get education, they will continue to not have a job. Uh, and until a person is being able to clean up their record, they will not have anywhere to stay. There have been instances of the people that I work with have not committed a crime in over 15 years, but they cannot get a place to stay because they have a background. This right here will help them be able to go and apply for an apartment, a housing, a job, education without being judged or without being told no. And I think this is again, I know I'm just ecstatic and so happy that this has happened. And yeah, and want to continue to do this work to end mass incarceration and support the folks that's been impacted by the system. and I will pass it on to Lisa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for sharing your story and for being such an incredible advocate for change, for equality, and for second chances. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa McGann, and I'm the policy director at Georgia Justice Project. I joined GJP in late 2019 after working as a volunteer lawyer in the criminal records clinic, and I too saw firsthand the life-changing effects of restricting and sealing old criminal records. So while last year we were singularly focused on one issue, getting the second chance bill passed through both chambers and signed into law, this year we have a broader policy agenda, but still singularly focused on reducing the number of individuals under correctional control and all the ensuing barriers to reentry. So what is our agenda for the 2021 legislative session? Number one, probation reform. Georgia, unfortunately, still leads the nation with the number of individuals under community supervision. That means serving probation or parole. This is despite legislative reform 3 years ago. Number two, driver's license reform. Georgia still automatically suspends driver's licenses for non-driving offenses and then charges a non-waivable reinstatement fee to get it back. A driver's license is almost imperative to getting a job in Georgia, so a huge barrier to economic opportunity when taken away, especially when it stems from simply being poor and has nothing to do with one's ability to drive. And finally, child support reform for low-income families. About half of all incarcerated individuals are parents, many of which have child support obligations. And while our main focus is strengthening families, for these individuals, dead broke dads are different from deadbeat dads, and we need a more integrated approach to computing child support obligations for low income and justice involved families so they can financially support their children. So let's dive into each of these issues a little bit more, and I will be specific about the solutions we are advocating for. And I see that my video is not on, or my video is on. Marilyn, you might need to turn your video off. Well, anyway, I can't see myself, but hopefully you all can see me. All right, so what is the problem with probation in Georgia? As I mentioned, Georgia has more individuals serving probation and parole than any other state in the country. 433,000 people. 1 in every 18 adults is on probation or parole in Georgia. And these numbers are staggering. The national average is 1 in 58. And this is not because Georgians commit more crime. Our crime rate is below the national average. We have more people serving probation because we have longer probation sentences than most states in the country. We keep individuals on probation for decades in Georgia. On average, individuals in Georgia serve 6.3 years, and the national average is about 2 years. So serve 3 times as much time in Georgia. 36 states already cap probation, most typically at 5 years, but 40% of all Georgians have sentences that exceed 10 years. This is a big problem because long probation sentences prevent individuals from accessing economic opportunity, providing for themselves and their families, from voting or contributing to their communities. And in many ways, it traps them in the criminal justice system because it is almost impossible to live with all the technical rules, such as missing a curfew or failing to report an address change, that are considered technical violations, but if broken will land you back in jail for decades. Our own Department of Community Supervision, they are the department that supervises all felony probation, has said that there are diminishing returns to keeping an individual on probation for more than 2 years. In addition, 25% of all prison admissions in Georgia last year were for these technical violations. These are not new crimes being committed. These are just rules being broken, and it costs taxpayers about $200 million a year, and it ruins lives. So what is the solution? There are a lot of them. Capping probation and eliminating the automatic arrest for technical violations are two that we are supportive of. But given the probation reforms that took place in 2017, what we are advocating for this year is the simplifying and streamlining of the early termination processes that are already embedded in the law, so that every individual serving a felony probation sentence has access to early termination after 3 years. We have a probation bill that makes sure that all individuals who have met their milestones on probation have access to early termination after 3 years. And we think this bill will have a significant impact on bringing down the number of people serving long probation sentences. And we would love your support on this probation bill. Our second policy initiative is driver's license suspensions. What is the problem with driver's license suspensions in Georgia? First of all, it is almost imperative that you have a driver's license if you want to work in Georgia. Almost all jobs require one, and our public transportation system does not alleviate that. Unfortunately, we still automatically suspend, take away driver's license for reasons that have nothing to do with driving. We suspend over 200,000 driver's licenses each year for the inability to pay debt, making it even harder for low-income or struggling individuals to become self-sufficient. Driver's licenses are automatically suspended if you are past due on your child support obligations, and they are automatically suspended for the failure to appear to pay minor traffic offenses, such as a busted taillight or tinted windows. Individuals that cannot pay these minor traffic offenses, and there are dozens of them, do not show up to court when they have no money because they will be put on misdemeanor probation, and the probation cycle thus begins for them. Many Georgians cannot afford a $200 ticket. These driver's license suspensions disproportionately affect low-income individuals and communities of color. In addition, through our work at the Metro reentry facility that Doug mentioned earlier, we see that many individuals leaving prison have a suspended driver's license, and they face a significant hurdle as there's a non-waivable $100 reinstatement fee, which is a huge barrier for them. Out of economic necessity, many individuals with a suspended license continue to drive to work anyway. 50,000 individuals are arrested in Georgia every year for driving on a suspended license. And Black drivers are 7 times more likely to be arrested for driving on a suspended license than white drivers in some counties in Georgia. So there's a significant racial profiling aspect in this as well. If you're convicted of driving a suspended license, you serve a mandatory minimum of 2 days to 12 months in jail. You have an additional $500 to $1,000 fine, probably lose your job, and have more fines now than you could ever afford, all because of a busted taillight. So what's the solution? This is a complicated issue, and there are many solutions, such as outright eliminating the ability to automatically suspend driver's licenses for non-driving offenses, or decriminalizing traffic minor offenses. A number of states do that. Another solution is allowing individuals to enter into payment plans for traffic tickets. Many states also do that. We are working on a number of ideas, but what we have right now is a bill which allows low-income individuals the ability to get a 100% waiver of their reinstatement fee for their driver's license. We know that this will have a significant impact on low-income individuals and those individuals that are reentering from prison. And again, we would love your support on this reinstatement fee waiver bill. Finally, what is the issue with child support in Georgia? Another big issue. Child support works for middle income and high income families, but not for low income families. So what do I mean by this? First, we are one of the states that does not provide individuals a basic needs level of income when calculating child support orders to feed and house themselves so they can more effectively support their children. Second, as I mentioned before, about half of all individuals that are incarcerated are parents, and many of them have child support orders. While these individuals are incarcerated, we do not pause these child support orders. They continue to accumulate along with a 7% interest, so that when they complete their sentence, they have a significant amount of outstanding child support debt and automatically get their driver's license suspended, which of course prevents them from getting a job and being able to support their families and themselves. These are only a couple of issues. To address these and other issues, we have formed a working group consisting of many organizations, child and family advocacy groups such as Voices for Georgia's Children, and other solutions-focused advocacy groups aimed at making Georgia's child support policies the best for all families. We want to support and expand the programs that are working, like the Fatherhood Program and Parent Accountability Courts, and we want to work on changing the programs that are not working. And we would love anyone who's interested to join this working group. The specific solution we are addressing this year is that we have a bill that will address the issue of child support orders accruing during incarceration. It will create a process for automatic review of child support orders for anyone that is incarcerated for more than 6 months. For those individuals that have no resources and no ability to earn income while they are incarcerated, they will have their child support orders paused until they finish their sentence. Many states already do this, and federal law already mandates that either this needs to happen or states have to give notice to individuals that they have a right to have their child support orders modified upon incarceration. We know that more money will go to children if we set parents up to be able to work so they can support their families. And again, we would love your support on this child support reform bill. So in closing, probation, driver's license, and child support for low-income families are the 3 tangible issues we are working on for the 2021 legislative session. We always have expanding criminal record restriction and sealing on our policy agenda, as Brenda mentioned. We're not proposing anything in that respect for this year, but we're already thinking about it for 2022. So I also want to just say thank you for all your support on the Second Chance campaign, and we're super excited about the upcoming legislative session and continuing to make real change in Georgia. And I'll turn it over to DJ and Ann Colleton to talk about how you can stay involved in all these policy issues. Thanks again to everybody.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And so just to kind of piggyback up a little bit about what Lisa was saying. So first of all, let me go back because I always do that. My name is DJ Sims. I'm the criminal records specialist and reentry organizer here at Georgia Justice Project. So I spend a lot of time working with folks who are interested in criminal expungement, criminal record restriction, explaining the new bill, and also helping organizations think about how we can partner, work together, throw down, and create a more inclusive Georgia. So if you do have, first of all, if you do have questions about First Friday or intake, feel free to email me. My contact information is below. And then secondly, a new initiative that we are starting or rebuilding is our community advisory group. And so to kind of piggyback on what Lisa was saying, not only do we want to be informed by partners and organizations, but we want to be informed by people. And we want to be informed by people who are experiencing these issues, who have firsthand knowledge. And so in rebuilding our community advisor group, which we made of not only just former clients that we have served, but also people in the community, people who have firsthand knowledge of these experiences, so that we can be not only informed by data, but also informed by people and experiences, which is built. So if you, and organizations are also able to participate in this group. So if you're interested in participating in our community advisor group, or you have additional questions about it, again, my contact information below. We would love to hear from you, and not only gain feedback, but to include you in these sessions. They will be launching later this month. So if you need any more information on that, let me know. If you have any questions about intake or what our process looks like, or any questions about First Friday, or you want to engage with the criminal records process at GJP, My email is below. You can reach me at dj@gjp.org. And I will pass it over to Ann, who will go in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, DJ. Well, as Brenda said, we are really grateful for everyone's involvement last year in helping pass SB 288, and this year we hope will be the same. We actually have a new tool that will make it even easier for people to take action. So if you sign up for action alerts, we will send you emails. I promise we won't inundate you with emails every day. We'll just send emails when it's relevant and important and timely. We'll make it very easy for you. If you don't know who your state representative is, you put in your address, it'll pop up, it'll easily send something to your state elected officials. So there's been a lot of news, of course, right, with the federal election, but just to remember, we're not talking about our federal officials, we're talking about our state representatives and state senators, many of whom we know less well as the people in Washington, but those are the folks who pass bills related to criminal justice reform in Georgia. So please sign up and we will send you emails that make it easy for you to do that. Just a little bit about the process. When Lisa has drafted legislation, when we get a sponsor, they submit the bill, it gets a bill number, and then it is assigned to a committee. So the first step is a committee will take up the bill and consider it and hear testimony from experts, from advocacy groups who are for and against it. Any citizens who want to speak for or against the bill will be there. And then they debate it and then vote on it. And assuming it passes that committee, then it moves to the floor of that chamber for a vote. And then if it passes that, then it goes to the other chamber and is heard in a committee and then the floor there, and then it can be signed into law. But that is the process, just if you're not familiar with that. But again, we will send everything to make it clear about that. And because it's voting season in Georgia, I have to mention that just know that if you have a criminal record, if you have a felony conviction, you cannot vote while you're under sentence for a felony conviction, but you can vote as soon as that sentence is done. So don't think that just because you have a felony conviction that you are not a constituent and don't have a right to vote and don't have a right to contact your legislator. If you have any information about that, please go to gjp.org/voting. We have a lot of information there about voting rights, and a lot of people don't realize that they have the right to vote once their sentence is complete. The other way you can help is to share your story. Lisa had presented a lot of great data about why these reforms are needed, but it always helps to have personal stories to show how these policies affect real people and real families and how it's really damages people. And so if you are interested in doing that, we did that a lot with the Second Chance campaign. Sometimes it was in writing. People wanted to be anonymous. That's totally understandable and fine. Sometimes people recorded videos sharing their story, and other times people came to the Capitol and testified. So all of those options are available if people would like to do that as a way to advocate for change. Of course, social media, especially in this virtual world, is a great way to spread the word. So please follow us on social media. And if you have any questions about how you or your organization can get involved in supporting these policy initiatives that Lisa described, please feel free to reach out to me. And I think now we're going to take questions that were posed in the Q&A box, if there were any. I can't see that, so maybe if everyone just wants to come back on, and if there were common themes in there that we should address verbally instead of just in the chat box, please come back on to do that.
And you want to make it so we can all start our videos up again?
I think you can do that yourself, can't you?
No, I think you have to allow us. So I do, I have a question that came up in the Q&A that, Lisa, it would be great if you could address this somewhat. So somebody asked, and I think a lot of other folks probably have this question as well, is why, focus on sort of the implementation of the reforms that were passed a few years ago in probation, and why not pursue a more aggressive course of trying to bring Georgia in line with some of the other states that have caps on probation, because that would impact a lot of other people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we actually think that there will be legislation introducing capping probation in this session. And we are supportive of that. We think it'll be, well, we're pretty confident that it will be introduced. It will not be introduced by a Republican. We have spent a lot of time talking to legislators about probation reform, talking to stakeholders, the Department of Community Supervision, prosecutors, judges, and working on what can we actually get done this year. Not what do we want to get done in the long term, because capping probations would be great, but what can we actually get done this year that is going to alleviate and help individuals immediately. And we've come up with a solution that we've gotten stakeholders to buy into, and that is, making sure everybody has access to early termination. And truthfully, I kind of feel bad about saying this out loud, but if people have access to early termination at 3 years, it's better than a 5-year cap. And so that's what we're going to do on the immediate front. But we also are very supportive of probation caps. But we've been working on this for a good bit of time, and we have a lot of support already at the Capitol for it. So we're looking for something. Our numbers are staggeringly high, and we are looking for something that will have an immediate impact right now on the numbers. So is that helpful?
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I think that helps clarify the long-term goals for that. Another issue that came up, and I think comes up a lot when we talk about our goals around child support, is concerns about custodial parents and how this would impact them. And I know it's really complicated issue, but maybe you could address this a little bit and talk a little bit about what we found about actually how it hurts, how our current policies are hurting custodial parents.
Sure. There is almost $2.5 billion of unpaid child support debt. It's a real problem, and 83% of the parents that the Department of Child Support Services works with are behind on their child support payments. What is really, really important is having, and what every piece of research shows is when child support orders are set at a level at which people can pay, more money goes to children. And what is happening right now is that because individuals, and I'll say fathers because they're mostly fathers, but or the non-custodial parent, if they can't take care of themselves, what they are doing is they're not taking jobs, they're not taking above the table jobs because all their wages are getting garnished. They take under the table jobs and they keep all that money for themselves, and it's not going to the children. So that's a problem that we're trying to address. But the more immediate problem that I talked about with the bill that we have is there's already a federal law that says states have to do one of two things. States have to automatically suspend child support orders for individuals that are incarcerated over 6 months, or they have to provide notice that individuals can apply for a modification and it has to be reviewed. So what most states do, or a lot of states, they automatically suspend. But this only happens for individuals. If you have resources or assets, this is not apply to you. This is for individuals who have absolutely no assets, no resources, no way to earn an income. The money's not getting to the children in the first place. They have no assets to give the children. What we're trying to do is set them up so that when they leave, when they finish their sentence, they can get a job and start paying child support orders. Otherwise, what is happening right now is they come out of prison with child support debt and they can't get a driver's license to get a job and then they never end up paying these child support orders. So in the long run, more money will go to it is all about getting more money to the children. And it's really only for individuals who have no resources, no assets, are incarcerated for more than 6 months, and the suspension ends the minute they leave, their sentence is over.
So a couple of questions that I just want to address about intake and how, for folks that are interested in figuring out how they can take advantage of SB 288 and get their record cleared potentially. We will send out the slides afterwards that have our intake information in them, the intake email. The best way to start the process is for you to attend our First Friday's presentation, or the presentation that we're doing tomorrow with the chamber. There's still plenty of spots to sign up for that. We just think it's helpful to give people an overview of kind of what eligibility is and how the process works before you meet with an attorney and we go over your actual record. So yes, that is the way that you would start that process. Also had a question about pardons, because as I mentioned before, finally we're able to get some felonies expunged in Georgia, and we are really excited about that, but you do have to get the pardon first. And as I mentioned, you can apply to get your felony conviction pardon 5 years after you're off paper. So that's 5 years after you've completed your probation or parole. And it is a rather lengthy process to apply. It's a long, complicated application. And, I know we worked with Marilyn for several months putting hers together to submit a really strong package. So start now, if that's your situation. You want to start that pardon process right away. And we did have in the slide of when our pardon presentation is coming up that's going to focus specifically on that. There was a question about whether or not you can apply for a pardon early. In some limited circumstances you can, and that is primarily if you have an employer or a school that is saying, we want to hire Brenda, but we can't because she's got this felony conviction on her record, and if she got a pardon, we would be able to hire her. So it has to be something sort of very specific documentation. So those are rare, but occasionally that is possible. So if you're pursuing, a certain profession, you might not be able to get a job or, finish your education because you can't complete an internship or something like that. It is feasible, but just to answer that question, that it is rare. And I'll go ahead and check the new questions that have come in again. One other thing that a couple people have asked about is resources for employers. So we have done one presentation in partnership with the Chamber for employers, and are going to be doing another with them and another chamber in Douglas County coming up in a couple of months. But I believe the recording of the chamber conversation is available online, so we will send that link to you. And we are working on creating materials and sort of best practices for employers, and are more than happy to go talk to a group of employers about how this law impacts them. So if you have connections there or want to have us come speak about that, we would be thrilled to do that. I'm just trying to review any other questions that have come in. Let's see.
Yeah, Brenda, there's a question asking for clarification on SB 288 misdemeanors versus any felonies.
Yeah, so the main part of SB 288 in terms of expungement is around misdemeanors, because many more people are convicted of misdemeanors in Georgia. And like I said, you can, under the new law, you can petition the court to be able to expunge up to 2 misdemeanor convictions. It's a lifetime limit at this point. Hopefully at some point we'll get that lifted, but right now it's 2 in a lifetime that you can petition. There are some exceptions, And I believe one of the links that Ann put in the chat box has a link to a flyer that lays out what those exceptions are. And we can also send that along when we send the link to the presentation. But some sex crimes, crimes against children, serious driving offenses, including DUI, are excluded. And most domestic violence crimes are excluded as well. There are some domestic violence offenses that if an individual was under 21 at the point that they were arrested, they can still get expunged. But for other folks, they are excluded. And those exceptions are results of a sort of long and drawn out negotiation process with legislators and prosecutors and other stakeholders on what they were willing to vote for. So we are hoping to continue to, limit the exceptions and expand eligibility for both misdemeanors and felonies, but that's where we're at right now.
And Brenda, there's one more question about SB 288. The question is, if your record is restricted under SB 288, can you answer no to an application that asks, have you ever been convicted of a?
Yeah, unfortunately not. And this is something that, we went through so many drafts of this bill and negotiations, and that was something that was taken out. We are hoping to potentially get it reintroduced, talking to some legislators about that. Because there are some states where if you received an expungement and if you were asked if you were ever convicted, you can say no. That is not the case in Georgia. So you do still have to answer those questions. But what I'll say about that is a lot of employers are not asking on the front end anymore, particularly larger and national employers that operate in many different states with different rules about how criminal records can be considered. So a lot of employers have moved to, not asking on the front end and then just sort of waiting to see what comes up. Because if they don't know about it, if they don't see it, then they don't have to deal with it. They don't have to utilize it in their decision-making process. So they don't necessarily want to see everything. So the hope is through SB 288 that those things they won't show up because they will have been expunged. They will have been sealed. So the private background check companies can't report them to the employers. It's never foolproof because, we're living in the information age and data gets out there and it's hard to pull it back in. But yes, to be direct about your question, you do, if asked, you still have to report that. So you would just say yes, but it has been expunged.
There's also a question about how we partner with local DA offices around the state. And I think it may be a question about the summits that we're doing.
So yeah, until COVID hit, we were spending a lot of our time doing partnering with local jurisdictions on expungement summits around the state. And of course, at that point, expungement was much more limited. So we were mainly talking about non-convictions, but we had worked on probably about 40 of them. The one-day events where people could pre-register and come and get their non-conviction expunged and sealed for free. So those are really incredible events, and we're hoping to be able to pick them back up. And we're trying to have conversations with prosecutors about how SB 288 fits into that, because before we were just dealing with non-convictions, now we're dealing with convictions. So it makes it a little bit more complicated from their perspective and how they consider the applications and the folks that are applying. But we are trying to engage them in those conversations so that hopefully by mid next year or mid this year, it's this year, we can be back in person and doing those events. I don't know, Doug, to the larger issue of how we communicate with prosecutors, perhaps you would like to address that.
You did great, Brenda. What I would say is I do think there is more interest from prosecutors because they anticipated this onslaught of effort, with the 1.5 million and a conservative number of people in Georgia who will have access to this new law, for instance. They're concerned about their offices being flooded. So we've been in touch with a handful of places. Like, for instance, one of our plans is to help work with jurisdictions to put in something that's called an expungement desk, for instance. which would facilitate a quicker, faster process for folks to get this done at the local courthouses. So yeah, I think there is interest, and we're finding for a defense-oriented place, it's always kind of weird to have friends or called prosecutors friends who want to work with you, but I think that's the opportunity, and that seems to be happening more and more.
And on the issue of probation and driver's license and child support reform, in terms of just communicating with the DA offices around the states, they're all stakeholders. So we always, when we talk about stakeholders, we include that in stakeholders. We're always reaching out and getting input. Okay, I think everyone's frozen.
I don't think folks are frozen. I don't see any more questions. I can't believe that we actually finished something on time, which is not our usual MO, so that's exciting. But Anne lost power, so I don't think we're not able to put up the contact information from the slides. Oh, nope, she's back. All right. So if you have any questions, Anne, is there anything you want to say to wrap us up?
No, just thank you for coming, and look for emails, sign up for advocacy emails, and thanks for being partners.